All right. Hello, everybody. I'm live right now, but there's no one in the chat right now. Did my remind message go out? Let's check that. Hey, we got one person in here. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for coming. Comment below. Tell me who you are. Who's here in the room right now? Welcome, welcome. Thank you for coming. Hello. Got my special Clifford t-shirt on just for today. Okay, let's see if we can get some more people in the room. Let me see. And I emailed this out. Who's in the room right now? Tell me who you are. Oh, you just left. Oh no, it's just me. I'm all alone. Just went live. Okay, one person in the room. Who's in the room? Tell me who's here. We'll still do the review session, even if only that one person stays. Who's in the room? Comment below. Tell me who you are. Okay, well, we got two people in the room. One thumbs up. I'll take that as I'm doing awesome so far, even though we haven't done anything. Please comment. Tell me who you are. Write down any questions you have. I didn't get any emailed questions, so I just plan to go over all the graphs. But any questions you have, you want me to go over a problem, go over a graph, explain what you need to know about it. Remember, for this test, you won't be submitting graphs. You're just going to answer the questions, and I'm sure they want a lot of explanation. So normally in macroeconomics, explanations are really not as important. Most of the times in an FRQ, maybe they'll ask you to explain one or two things. But for this one, they're really going to want you to basically explain the graphs. So some students were like, oh, cool, so we don't have to do graphs. I'm like, well, that's like 80% of the class is graphing and stuff like that. So you're still, even though you're not going to draw the graphs, you don't need to memorize the graphs. Just like with Gov, I told you guys you didn't need to memorize the amendments or memorize the court cases. Also, I went on Twitter, I searched hashtag APGov, and so I got some idea of what was going on and that kinds of stuff. And I saw a lot of students posting very depressed tweets about how there were like no court cases on the test, which was, I thought that might happen. You still maybe could have used it in the argument essay. Just to be honest with you guys, for the Gov test, I have not seen it. I don't know what it looks like. They told us May 26th. And from what I've seen, teachers were posting stuff on Facebook, and then other teachers like, you shouldn't be talking about this and all this kind of stuff. So I'm like totally in the dark, and I'm fine to be there anyways. I'll get the answers when I need to, and I'm fine with that. So let's talk macro. Anybody want to comment below? Tell me who's here. We got two people here right now. Comment. Tell me who you are. Don't stay anonymous, or just comment to say hi so that I know you have the ability to comment. Basically today, guys, I just plan to go over all the graphs, go over some of the main key topics and concepts, and I'll pull up Mr. Clifford's predictions on what he thinks the macro test will be. I forgot to do this, I meant to do it before, but I'm going to upload a new COVID edition Google Slides video with much more practice questions built in with the answer keys and that kinds of stuff. I worked on that all yesterday, and then I just forgot to upload it online. So that was silly, and I'm just remembering that now. So I apologize for that. I'll do it right after this live stream. It's the same thing. I just inserted some FRQs in there for practice and that kinds of stuff. Like here's an FRQ on unemployment. Here's an FRQ on Phillips Curve, that kinds of stuff. So you can practice those specific concepts as they appear through there. Okay, so we got two people here. Two's enough. We can graph. If you're graphing along with me, if you have a whiteboard, cool. If you don't, that's okay too. Grab a piece of paper and just a pencil, pen, whatever. It doesn't matter. You can graph with anything. Basically, I just want to go through all of those and then explain some shifts and explain kind of what I think might appear or what kinds of stuff they might ask about. Here's a good thing. Again, we don't need to worry about memorizing, but we do need to apply. So they might ask us a question about like a formula. Cool. Then we just apply the formula, basically. We can't just give them the answer. And that's true for new macro tests. They want to see the work. They don't just want to see the answer. It used to be if you just put 12 and that was the answer, they were like, okay, they must have gotten it right. But now they want to see, this times this is this. Okay, so I've been using my whiteboard a lot lately, but not for graphing. It's been a long time since I've done graphing. But my whiteboard, I've been doing lots of addition and multiplication. No, we just learned multiplication yesterday. That was very scary. Been doing a lot of addition and subtraction with my niece, and she makes me do it along with her, and then sometimes I'll have to show her the thing. So just so you know, just to let you know, I still can add and subtract very well. I'm very proud about that. So that skill, shout out to my first grade and second grade teachers for doing that well for me. Okay, first graph we're going to do, what is it? What's the first graph that we learned? You're thinking in your head, you're commenting below, but you're probably not. It's just me in here. Okay, it's the production possibilities curve. So go ahead and graph that out for me. I will do it right now. Let's see if I can graph. Well, you guys see me. Let's see if I can do a think aloud. This is just, we're gonna try this out. Okay, so the PPC is, all our graphs start like this. And sorry if it's a little, not so straight. That's okay. All our graphs start looking like this. And so the PPC we can do, it looks most commonly like this. But you can also have a straight line PPC, and I'll explain the difference between the straight line and the curved line in just a little bit. But basically for the PPC, we could have like apples and oranges or, Lamborghinis and Volvos. It doesn't matter what two things. This reminds me, I was trying to teach one of my friends this graph, and we were doing it on chalkboard and that kinds of stuff. And she did not get the concept that it had to be two physical goods. I'm like, what are two things you can produce? And she's like, happiness. And I was like, no, not happiness. And so then I found a 3-year-old and I was like, hey, do you like cars and trucks? He was like, yeah, I love trucks and cars. So I was like, okay, cars and trucks, right? We can do that too. But most of the times when you see the PPC, you're going to see capital goods, so cap goods, and consumer goods. That's like the broader based one. That's just like all the consumer goods and all the capital goods. Remember that the capital goods are the goods that we use to make consumer goods. So capital goods, remember, are tools, machinery. So a tractor is a capital good, a machine and a factory, that kinds of stuff. All examples of capital goods. Consumer goods, are you eating something right now? That's a consumer good. Or this, marker is a consumer good. Yay, awesome. Okay, so this is basically, and a lot of times we'll put data on here too. So we could say like 100 and 200 or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Most of the times we're not actually using data. I shouldn't say a lot of times. And so what do we need to know about the PPC? What are the first few things that we need to know? Well, go ahead and label for me the point that is inefficient. So you've got some underemployed resources, basically, inefficient. Show me the point that's efficient. Show me any point that's efficient, because there could be multiple points on our PPC. And then show me something that's unattainable right now without economic growth or trade. Okay, so we'll say point A is inefficient. So inefficient is basically anything in this quadrant here. So my point A could be here, 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 doesn't matter. Anything in this quadrant here, that's all inefficient, okay? And I know that because I could be producing more consumer goods, more capital goods. Honestly, right now, this is where we are in our real economy, in the American economy. We are not on our PPC, that's for sure. We just hit unemployment numbers that I've never even seen in my lifetime. It's pretty crazy. We're over 15%. Which is ridiculously high. And even some economists say that number might be higher than it is. Because remember, that statistic isn't a perfect measure. That's scary. That's like Great Depression levels was 25%. And I never thought we would even get close to that in our lifetime. But, things happen. Pandemics happen. So this is why we're dealing with that. Anyways, so B is a point here. And that's efficient. And remember, B could be anywhere. It could even be here where you're like only making consumer goods. Or you're only making capital goods. But basically be anywhere on the curve. That's your efficient point. That's where you're looking good. And then you've got this point up here, which is point C. And that's basically the unattainable. You can't achieve that. I can't achieve this amount of capital goods and consumer goods unless there is, you're saying it right now, I can hear it, economic growth. So let's say what could cause economic growth? What if we had increased amount of resources, the availability of resources increased? Or maybe we discovered a new technology that's allowed us to produce more. And so what's that going to do? It's going to shift our PPC outwards. Now that's shifting outwards for both goods. Technically, you could just shift it for one good. Let's say our technology was only for consumer or for capital goods, then that's what our PPC would look like. But most of the times when we're showing economic growth, we're showing that both consumer and capital goods or both products, we're going to be able to produce more of basically. And so now that point C is attainable. And now that point C is actually efficient. Okay, so that's the first graph. That's the PPC. That's easy. Okay, any questions about that? You're not commenting, so why am I asking? But if you have questions, please comment below. Or text me on Remind because I can get those too. Still 3 people in the room. I'm super proud of those people that are here. And I hope that people who didn't catch it live are watching and graphing along with us. Okay, the next graph you need to do, the second graph that we learned about this in Unit 1, very simple one. It is demand and supply, Okay, here we go. So demand and supply, and I don't know if you can really see that green one. Sometimes green doesn't show up. Let's try black. Let's try that out. Okay, so boom. Okay, demand and supply. So again, all our graphs start off looking like this. Cool. I also, on my website, I have a sheet that you can download that has 9 of these basically with the graphs labeled. I highly recommend you download that sheet, you fill it out yourself, you do the graphs yourself. And then that's going to be an excellent cheat sheet. So that when they're like, what happens in the Phillips curve? You're like, whoop, here's the Phillips curve. Okay, here's what's happening and all that kind of stuff. Okay, we're going to do demand and supply now. So demand is D, downward sloping. Oh, I forgot to do my labels. How silly. Price is up here and quantity is down here, P and Q. And price of what? Quantity of what? That just depends, you know, because remember for demand and supply, we're looking at specific markets. So market for apples, market for dolls, market for, you know, cars, whatever. Okay, so demand is always downward sloping. There's a few reasons why that is. Basically, the income effect that as prices go down, we have effectively more real income, more purchasing power. So we buy more stuff. As prices go up, we don't have as much money to buy stuff, right? If I only have $1 income and candy bars cost $1, then I can only buy one candy bar. But if they drop, if the price drops to 50 cents, I can buy 2 candy bars. Okay, also that foreigners buy less of our stuff. Oh, no, that's aggregate demand. What am I saying? That's not demand. The income effect. Oh, the substitution effect too, that people will like substitute other goods basically. So, oh my gosh, apples increased in price. Oh, I'll just buy some oranges. For me, I just pay for the more expensive apples because I'm a huge fan of apples, but that's just neither here nor there. Regardless, the average consumer will substitute. Okay, boom, demand and supply, that's it. That's it. It's easy. It's X, and X marks the spot. What spot does it mark? Equilibrium. So that's my equilibrium price, PE. That's my equilibrium quantity, QE. Nice. What is that price? Doesn't matter. A lot of times, like I said, we don't use real data. But what happens if, so let's say this price is $2. Let's say we're talking about what costs $2. I don't even know. Let's a cup of coffee. I don't drink coffee, but I'll assume I will say $2. It's probably more than that, actually. Let's say $2 is a cup of coffee. Okay. $2 is a cup of coffee. What if a greedy coffee seller, what if Starbucks is like, and I think Starbucks just started this for coffee, so it's probably a really bad example. What if Starbucks is like, let's charge $10 for coffee. We're going to charge $10. We're going to make all kinds of money. When the equilibrium price is $2, well, what's going to happen is Starbucks is like, yeah, let's make more coffee because we're making all this kinds of money. But then demanders, who's going to buy a cup of coffee for $10, right? Very few people will. So what you're going to have there is what? Do we know what this is that I'm graphing right here? It is a surplus. What's the problem here is that you have a surplus of coffee. You greedy seller, you're trying to sell coffee to people at $10. People can't afford it at $10. And a lot of times they're like, ooh, I don't want the coffee at $10. That's too expensive, so no thank you. And vice versa. What if they go, oh, they have an overreaction and go, okay, let's just charge $1. Then all of a sudden people are like, I'm going to drink 3 cups of coffee a day at $1. That's awesome. Or twice the amount that I was before, you know. So what are you going to run into then? What's the problem then? You're going to have a shortage. I know it's really hard to see that. That says surplus. I'm sorry, this is hard to write like this. That says shortage. So surplus if your price is too high, shortage if your price is too low. Eventually market forces will tell you, basically you, the consumers, you, the market and the sellers will figure out, hey, this is the best price for a cup of coffee and stuff like that. Okay, so that's demand and supply. And that's just market demand and supply. Probably won't come up. You know, what's really interesting, even though demand and supply is one of the key core concepts, they don't ask about it a lot on the FRQs. And I think the reason for that is because they ask a lot of questions about aggregate demand and aggregate supply, which relate. So all that stuff you know about that, you can then translate to that basically. But I've never actually, think about it, I've never actually seen them ask about demand and supply in the FRQs. I'll see it in multiple choice every now and then. But okay, that's that third graph. Now I'm thinking, let's go travel along. And okay, so we're done with unit 1. We had PPC and we had the demand and supply graph. And then in unit 2, there's actually one graph, but you don't even need to graph it. They usually don't have you graph it. And so basically this is the business cycle. Do you remember that one that was like a roller coaster basically? This is that business cycle. I kind of doubt that they'll ask you about this, to be honest, because it's kind of just like a definition question. It's not something they ever have students graph. But remember that basically all economies go through this business cycle basically, where like we're rising and GDP is expanding and we're all awesome. And then we hit a peak and then basically so that's our peak. And then all of a sudden we're going down the roller coaster. That's what we're doing right now. Remember I told you when we learned about this, going down the roller coaster sucks? This is what we're experiencing right now. And in life, a roller coaster is fun and going down is the best part for most people. But for us, right now, we're dealing with decreasing GDP. We're dealing in that. And when GDP is decreasing, what's happening to unemployment? It's going up. Remember that. They have an inverse relationship. we don't need to produce as much stuff because we're home all the time. Also, a lot of small businesses are closing. So workers aren't producing because the managers can't pay them and the stores aren't open. So they, that kind of thing. A lot of businesses, and it's kind of sad, but they run month to month, meaning that they can't really afford to like take a month off. They can't really afford to take a hit on a month's worth of income. Most businesses need to survive month to month, and they rely on loans and they rely on all that kinds of stuff. So that's what we're dealing with right now. And we did do some fiscal policy to try to correct that, but most economists say it's probably not enough, even though we did a $2 trillion package. The Democrats just released a new $3 trillion package that they said is focused more on small businesses and that kind of stuff. But sadly, the Senate or the leader of the Senate has basically already said, no, I think we're going to have to wait. I don't want to do anything until Memorial Day, which is arbitrary, but whatever. And so basically now we're not going to see probably any congressional action to take new action probably until after Memorial Day. And then if so, I think the Senate is going to want to, change the bill, which is fine. They should definitely make it a better bill. That's why we have the thing like that. But I think, taking no action at all might be a little costly. Anyways, eventually, guys, it's going to happen. And I don't know when. I can't predict. Remember, most economists can usually predict after and go, oh, that's when we hit our peak. Oh, I'd say like mid-February was when we hit our peak, basically. And then all of a sudden, we started having lockdowns and all that kinds of stuff. So eventually we're going to hit a trough, like our bottom out. Or if you ever hear someone like they go, oh, I hit rock bottom. That's our rock bottom, basically. And we don't always know where that is. Like, again, an economist right now, the good thing about this outbreak is I'm reading all kinds of articles about the economy. So I'm learning more and more every single article, which is good for me in my learning process, but it sucks what I'm learning about, obviously, as far as the economy and how things work and that kinds of stuff. Anyways, so we're going to hit a trough at some point, and then we're going to start expanding again, right? And then eventually we'll hit a peak, basically. So basically the phases that you need to know for that is there's expansion. That's that. There's peak. Then you have, they call it recession. Some textbooks will call it contraction, but in your curriculum, it's recession. So that's what we're going to call it. But it's also a contraction of the economy. Basically, you're going down the roller coaster. Then you hit a trough. That's like your bottom out. That's the opposite of a peak. And then you're going to start expanding again. And like the idea is like, hopefully over time, we'll see like a growth trend in GDP, basically, as we're going down all this and that kind of stuff. They rarely ask about that. What do you need to know about the business cycle? Just the phases. That's it. That's all. And like I said, I should probably stop spending so much time on this because I doubt it's going to appear. They're not going to have you draw it because they said no graphing. And they don't have you usually draw this anyways. Actually, I've never seen draw. Normally I see it in multiple choice questions and stuff. They could ask though, what phase of the business cycle would you be in, and explain. And so for that, you would just say, recession because GDP is falling, or expansion because GDP is rising. Know the because. Please know the because I think it's going to be important as far as the explanation points and that kinds of stuff. Okay, so we're done with Unit 2 because there's really that's the formula unit. Unit 2 has I want to say 7 or 8 formulas. So I will also create a cheat sheet for that. I've been meaning to do that for a while, actually. I do have it, all the formulas I have in that packet that I created, the ultimate or AP macro review guide. So I do have all the formulas in there, so you can find them in there. There's the business cycle. Let me find a formula. I'm past Unit 2. That's why I should find that. There you go. Yeah. So I have all those formulas in there. So if you want to see them, but I'll put them onto a cheat sheet for you. I'll probably make like a COVID cheat sheet, I'm thinking, that you guys can just use to copy and that kinds of stuff. Okay, so now Unit 2 is over. That's mostly the formula unit, and then the business cycle. Circular flow's in there too, but again, that's like a multiple choice question. I don't think they're going to ask you about circular flow. That's just the economy, how it flows, goods and services, and how money flows. Well, goods and services go like this, money goes like this. Okay, so the most important graph, probably your favorite graph, definitely mine, is the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model. So go ahead and graph that out for me right now. You can graph along with me. Ooh, that looks pretty. That's pretty straight. Okay, so as always, we got to label our axes. And this would be price level. Sorry, it's been a while since I've graphed. I'm like, what is up here? Price level is up there. And then we have GDP. But we keep it real here. We don't care about that nominal. No nominal. Oh, I have other wraps that I did record, but I didn't put them on YouTube. So I'll put those on there today as well. I plan to do a bunch of recording today too. So I will plan to go through the COVID thing, the Google Slides thing, and I hope to get those out in the next couple of days. So hopefully your AP tests are going as well. The reason why I chose this recording time is I didn't want to conflict. So right now art is happening or I think A push is happening now. And I was like, you guys don't have A push. So that's why I chose this time. There's very little windows where we don't have somebody taking an AP test. So I apologize for that. Okay, let's get to this. So you probably already graphed this out as I'm blabbering along. Aggregate demand is downward sloping. Then we've got aggregate supply, short run, aggregate supply is upward sloping. Awesome. And how about I graph my economy in equilibrium? Okay, cool. Then I'll have this long run aggregate supply. Oh, it looks so pretty. I remember when our economy looked like that, and it used to make me so happy. But what are we dealing with right now? Let's actually graph that out. Why don't we do? I think I did graph it out for you before, but let's graph it out right now. So what's happening right now in the economy? I think we were probably in like an inflationary gap, to be honest with you. But now we're definitely heading towards a recessionary gap. If we're not already there, we will get there soon. So what's happening? Well, first of all, are consumers spending? No. Are businesses spending? No. Are government spending? Yes, the government is spending money, but not enough to make up for the lack of spending by consumers and businesses. Remember, consumers and businesses make up, I think it's 90% of AD, maybe 85. Well, 85, you don't need to know the number. I shouldn't do, who cares? Anyways, but it's a lot. It's a lot. So basically, we're seeing aggregate demand decreasing, maybe even more so than that. That's no good, but we're also seeing a double shift because we're also seeing supply decreasing. Can producers produce right now? No. So here's what we don't know. We don't know. Remember, if there's a double shift, we don't know what's happening to one thing. How do we know which thing? Well, I know for sure less GDP, less GDP, less GDP. Quantity is down at all three of those points. So definitely Q or quantity is going down, but price level, that's something that I don't know. We don't, and it depends on goods and services and all that kind of stuff. Regardless, we are in this recessionary gap right here, which sucks. So let's graph out just a recessionary gap. Go ahead and do that for me. I'm going to erase this right here because I graphed too much onto this. Let's graph real quick. I did the, let's do a recessionary gap. So remember, what makes it a recessionary gap is that we've got the point of contact of AS and AD before the LRAS. And then if we were in an inflationary gap, let me graph that real quick. An inflationary gap is when we're beyond the LRAS. We're like right here, which we were in a while ago, but now we're more like here right now, unfortunately. Okay, what do you need to know about this graph? It's probably going to appear. That's what I'm going to say. It's probably going to appear. This is the most important graph normally for macroeconomics, and I would be super shocked if there's not a heavy feature of the ASAD model on this. Even if they're just asking you questions, they might ask you, remember, they might ask you questions about unemployment related to this. They might say, the government is spending less. What's going to happen to unemployment? That's when you guys would want to graph it out, basically. Okay, if government's spending less, then I know that GDP is going down. That means unemployment's going up. That kind of stuff. So you should know the shifters for AD. What are the shifters for AD? Say it with me now. C, I, G, and XN. If any one of those changes, then we're going to see a shift in AD. C is consumers, I is investment, so businesses, G is government spending, and XN is the net exports. Remember, we take the exports and we minus the imports. We don't get to count stuff made by other countries. So that's the net exports, basically. We're going to count the stuff that we made and sent to other countries, but we're not going to count the stuff that was like iPhones are made in China. We're not counting iPhones as part of our GDP, basically, because we didn't make them, China did. Okay, so, and then what are the shifters for SRAS? That would be RAP, the resources, the actions of government, but not spending, and then productivity as well. Technology as well can be included in that too. Productivity, technology. In the curriculum, they say they're the same thing. They're technically not the same thing, but it seems like they're using them interchangeably, which I think is kind of weird. But technology creates more productivity in that sense, but they're slightly different. Technology is like a tool or something that we use a method that we use to make something. Productivity is when I'm making it. So, and I'm making it better, that kind of stuff. Anyways, okay, so ASAD model likely going to appear. They might ask you, say, the economy is below equilibrium or above equilibrium or that kind of stuff. So pay attention to that in the question. Pay attention to what the economy is in that state. That's probably the most important thing, I would say. Pay attention to that because they're probably not, they might, who knows, I shouldn't say probably not. But they like to say hey, we're in recession. Now what should we do? Likely going to be, if I had to guess, I would say they're probably going to there's two questions on this test. I would say there's probably going to be one that features ASAD, fiscal policy, and possibly connecting it to the Phillips curve, because remember, those are kind of connected, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. And I think the other question is going to be, I know you're going to hate it, but I think it's going to be a bank balance sheet and connecting it to monetary policy. Bank balance sheets, even though they suck, and I know we hate them because they're hard questions, but the thing is that you don't need to graph to answer them. So if I had to guess, and I know how AP works, and I would just think, practice your bank balance sheets. That's what I'm telling you, basically. And I've got some good practice in there too. Mr. Clifford's created a lot of great videos on that. Please, if you know that you stink at those, or you're just not as good, I shouldn't say stink, that's terrible. But if you're not as good at those, or those are the ones you struggle with, just keep practicing. I had that same problem with balancing equations when I was in chemistry, I want to say, and I just could not get it. And then I would just avoid it and be like, well, I'm just never going to get it. I had that fixed mindset, which is so negative. But eventually I took a class and we had to do balancing equations again, and the teacher wouldn't let me give up. She was basically like, no, you're going to learn this, and basically made me practice over and over again until I finally got it. And I have not used that since, so that is probably gone. No, I made the investment, so it's there, but I don't know how to balance equations anymore. I'm not practicing it. Anyways, okay, so that's the ASAD model. That's Unit 3. I think that's the only graph in Unit 3. Yeah, because Unit 3 is basically just the ASAD model. And then fiscal policy. What's fiscal policy again? Do we know fiscal policy? Students are always like, oh, it's so confusing. And it's really not. Fiscal policy is when government does spending, I'm a terrible writer, and taxes. Got to know that. You got to know what fiscal policy is, because they might ask you, what's the right fiscal policy action? If you're like, hey, the central bank should, right away, the reader's going to be like, they don't know fiscal policy. Central bank, that's monetary policy. That's silly. We should know fiscal policy. And then basically, if we're in recession, we should raise government spending. We should lower taxes to get consumers to spend more. Or if we're in inflation, we should lower the spending and then raise the taxes to get consumers to spend less. Okay. So that's it for Unit 3. Let's jump on to Unit 4. We're going to graph out the money market, your favorite. Oh, I could do it in green because I have a green one too, but no, I was doing red. Okay, money market. Now remember, in the money market, because the interest rates are determined by the central bank in the money market, it's a nominal interest rate. It's not a real interest rate that's been adjusted for inflation. So it's nominal interest rate. And then here we have quantity of, this is nice because it's very easy. It's called the money market. And it's quantity of money. Don't put dollars there because it's not dollars. Just quantity of money, because it could be any kind of money. Know that they won't ask you any currency questions, because currency is all in Unit 6. So you don't have to worry about value of a dollar or anything like that. If you see any questions referring to that. In fact, it was hard for me to find a couple Unit 1 examples, because most Unit 1 example, or some question 1 examples will feature some kind of question about, well, what if they traded with Europe? And then we have to factor that in. But you won't have to this time. So that's cool. So anyways, money market, quantity of money. MS is vertical because it's set by the central bank. Then you've got MD that's downward sloping. Basically, this graph is easy. The only thing that can happen is MS can shift right or shift left. MD can shift right or shift left. The shifters of MD are price level. Remember that if price level goes up, money demand goes up. Also technology, like money technology, banking technology, and income too. If we have more income, we're going to then demand more money. Basically, if we have less income, we'll demand less money. And then money supply, just know that that is controlled by the central bank, which for us is the Federal Reserve, but central bank is fine if you're going to put that in your answer. So money supply, remember that can go right or go left. So what if the Fed does expansionary monetary policy? Their ultimate goal is to try to lower interest rates. By lowering the interest rates, they get consumers and investors to buy more stuff, because lower interest rates is very attractive to us. And then basically that increases aggregate demand. So it's like an indirect effect, basically. They could also decrease the money supply to raise the interest rates, basically. I think that's probably what they're going to have you do. I think they're probably going to have you answer a question about maybe bank balance sheets and then connect it back to the central bank, and then maybe ask you about what happened to interest rates. And then they probably will ask you what will happen to bond prices too, because that's a fun relationship that we need to know. Remember that bond prices are inversely related. So if this happens, what's going to happen to bond prices? Well, and let's explain it. If the interest rates go down, you're going to want to buy up those old bonds that have more value because they have a higher interest rate. So the price of those previously issued bonds are actually going to go up. So remember, it's an inverse relationship. If interest rates go down, bond prices go up. Now, most of the times they didn't have you explain that, but this year they might. So please know that the reason why they're inversely related is because when bond prices go up or go down, it changes the perceived value of the old bonds. And if the interest rates go up, people don't want the old bonds. So the price lowers. It's like a, market effect basically. But if this happens where the interest rate lowers, all of a sudden I'm like, ooh, I want an old bond. I don't want a, new 5% bond. I want an old 7% bond, basically. So just know they're inversely related, and that's because basically they become more desirable or they change basically perceived values. Okay, so that's Unit 4. Unit 4 is all about monetary policy, but they also introduce a graph in Unit 4 that I actually think they should save for Unit 5, and I might even teach it differently next year because basically it's like we throw it in at the end. And it's similar to the money market. And I think that's why they couch it in here. But to me, it really should go with crowding out. But whatever. Anyways, so this is now the loanable funds market. Now, loanable funds market is easy because it's just demand and supply of loans. That's it. So some students are like, oh, another graph. Oh. But you don't sound like that. I shouldn't say that. But basically, some students are not super excited when I'm like, we have a new graph. And you're like, yay, cool. This one's easy, though, because it's basically demand and supply, but for loans. So a little bit different labeling, but same concepts. So demand downward sloping, demand LF, and then supply upward sloping, supply LF. You should know that this is borrowers, and this equals savers. They're going to use that type of language. They're going to increase savings or increase borrowing. They basically, in these questions, they kind of give you the answer. They don't directly say what will happen. Sometimes they will, actually, because in different textbooks, this is kind of funny. In different textbooks, they'll teach different things about what happens if government increases their spending. So it's crowding out, and you're going to see a higher interest rate. But some people say demand's going to increase, and that's why you have a higher interest rate. Other people say supply is going to decrease, and that's why you have a higher interest rate. I just go with demand increasing because that's just works for me. But they'll let you graph either. Whatever. Anyways, so I forgot to label this. So this is price of loans, but I shouldn't say price. We have to be more specific. What is the price of loans? It is the real interest rate. That's the price of loans, the real interest rate, that rate that you pay for your loan. And then this is just quantity Q of loans, or some students write out loanable funds. Both are fine. That's the loanable funds market. The most common time you're going to see this loanable fund market is if they say, show the effect of crowding out, or they won't say show the effect. They'll say explain the effect of crowding out. And what you're going to say is crowding out happens when the government increases their increases their spending, and they increase deficit spending specifically because they don't really make enough money in their tax collection, so they have to borrow. And what does that do? It basically raises the real rate of interest. Remember, that's not an effect that the government wants to happen. It's kind of a negative, they call it an adverse effect. So a negative effect that happens. And why? Because we like expensive things in this country and we don't like to pay for them. We don't like to wait our time and that kind of stuff. Like in life, for me, I usually would like to save. I don't like to go into debt. So I like to save up my money and then make a big purchase. For example, I just made a huge purchase. I just bought a king size bed. I'm very excited about it because I've never had a king size bed in my life. So I'm super excited about it. And then literally, like a week after, my water heater broke. So I'm laughing because I have to right now. That's how I get through these things. But that was something where it's like, okay, and I'm fine. I have enough in savings and stuff, so I'll be fine and stuff. I'll just have to dip into that for that. But it's just really funny. It's like I did the right thing. I saved this money so I could buy this huge purchase, and then I make the purchase, and then a major appliance in my household goes out that I have to replace. And those aren't cheap. Water heaters are expensive, and I like hot water. It's weird. It's just something that I take. Okay, so anyways, loanable funds market, there it is. Probably most times you're going to see it is when they show you that effect of crowding out. When government is borrowing more money, and so they go to the loanable funds when they borrow, and then that raises the real rate of interest, and then us, the consumers, we're crowded out. I was going to buy a car at 5%, but government raised the interest rate to 10%. Those jerks. Okay, we are almost there. I'm just trying to think right now. I'm going through the units in my head. We have one graph left, and that is the Phillips curve. So Phillips curve, like that, like all our graphs. Let me think. The Phillips curve, it's been so long since I've done the Phillips curve. Well, let's see. We've got a short run Phillips curve, SRPC. It's inflation and unemployment, and inflation goes here, and you can't interchange these. Please do not. Inflation and unemployment. Otherwise, the trade-off doesn't work. So that's inflation and unemployment. Remember this guy Phillips discovered that there is a trade-off between inflation and unemployment? He was basically like, hey, when this goes up, this goes down. When this goes up, this goes down kind of thing. And it kind of makes sense too. Like if people aren't working, they're not buying a lot of stuff. So prices aren't going to be going up. You're not going to see a lot of demand pull inflation. And same thing too, when workers are working, you're going to see basically people buying a lot more goods and then the country having to keep up with that demand and stuff like that. So that's the short run Phillips curve. That's the long run Phillips curve. Remember, in the long run, there is no trade-off basically. Someone was basically like, hey, Phillips, your model doesn't always work. And he's like, yeah, but I named a graph after myself. That doesn't always hold true, but still is taught by economics students. And so they were like, okay, this is the long run Phillips curve, that kind of stuff. Anyways. So basically, what do you need to know about the Phillips curve? First, we're always operating somewhere along this short run Phillips curve. Okay, always somewhere along that Phillips curve. We could be in equilibrium, which is right here. We could be in a inflationary gap, or we could be here in a recessionary gap. And remember, this is the mirror image of the ASAD model. So I know it's hard for you to be like, wait a minute, it's beyond this. That's inflation, but that's true in the ASAD model. But in this model, we basically learned, and I don't know if you guys remember this, but Phillips curve, we literally learned on the 2 days before we left. And I even had you guys graphing it out. I think I taught it to you the Thursday before we left, and the Friday, we did the auction and we did a worksheet on it. So most of you guys probably still have that worksheet. Some of you guys are actually able to do it day of. So I have the worksheet, which kind of sucks. But if you need anything, just let me know. I can send you anything if you need it. But basically, just know that we're always going to be operating somewhere along the Phillips curve. And then the other thing we need to know is basically when AD shift, we move along the SRPC. When AS shifts, short run aggregate supply, we actually shift our Phillips curve in the opposite direction. So let me do the mirrored effect here. This is the ASAD model. I'm not doing labels on this, so I apologize. So let's say we were like here, and then let's say that aggregate demand increased. All we would do is you could see, oh, now we're in inflationary gap. So all that would happen there, we would just move along our Phillips curve, okay? I'm just trying to erase that, sorry. Okay, so that's if AD moves, we move along our Phillips curve. Or if AD shifted to the left and went into recession, we just move down along our Phillips curve. So if you're like, how do I know if I move up along or down along? Well, what's happening to unemployment? What's happening to price level? You use those two things to guide you in that kind of stuff. So you don't have to memorize it. You could if you want to, and you could also graph it out too. Okay, but then what happens if, let's say there's a aggregate supply shock. Let's say there's like a lack of, or like we've seen this right now because the supply chains, like we get a lot of our supplies from China and stuff. And a lot of the stuff that we have comes from so many different sources. Like the sophisticated supply chain that we have is pretty intense and pretty awesome, except for now we're dealing with this pandemic. So it's like all these companies that used to get their supplies from this place and that place, all of a sudden those places close down or factories close down and that kind of stuff. And now they're scrambling to find resources elsewhere and that kind of stuff. So that's why we're seeing a lot of shortages. I don't know if you go to the stores and stuff like that and some of maybe your favorite stuff isn't there. We're dealing with meat shortages right now too, that some of you guys might have seen as well, that basically that's because a lot of our meat packing plants have had to close down because they're working in very close conditions and that kinds of stuff. So, you know, but they have seen an increase in those like alternative meats. Have you ever had like an Impossible Burger or Beyond Beef or that kinds of stuff? So I have, and they're pretty good actually. So I recommend it. Anyways, what happens if SRS shifts to the left? Our supply chain is breaking down. Oh no, what's going to happen is if SRS shifts left, SRPC shifts right. Okay. Just remember that they're going to go in opposite directions. So if you don't know which direction the SRPC is going in, graph it out on here. Do it on here, and just remember that SRS and SRPC are kind of like inverses, that they're going to go in opposite directions. Okay, that's the Phillips curve. Any other questions? Those are all the graphs. Because the last graph is, let me just check through there. The last graph is the foreign exchange market, but they're not going to include that. The last units, which I was so proud of myself because I actually had accelerated. This is actually nice that it happened this way. I had actually accelerated the learning process because I wanted to have more review time at the end. So we basically got done with economics. I remember some teachers that I was reading, they're like, I was only in unit 3 or I just touched on unit 3. And I'm like, oh, that sucks for you. My kids were way beyond that. So I actually pushed you guys a little bit faster than I had in normal years because I wanted just to see, can we just introduce and then review more and see what that looked like? Sadly, I won't get the data on that because I have to throw these test scores out this year just because it's just flawed data. It's a different test and different environment, different circumstances and all that kinds of stuff. So I'll maybe try that again next year. But either way, it was really cool. I was like, well, good thing I chose to do that this year because I think at the same time when I was like looking at my dates, I was about 2 or 3 weeks ahead of where I normally was. Okay, so real quick, scarcity. What is scarcity? You can't see this. Why I'm holding it up. Scarcity is basically that basic problem in economics that we have unlimited wants, but limited resources, basically. So right now we're dealing with scarcity in all kinds of areas. You're dealing with scarcity at the grocery store, or maybe families are dealing with scarcity because of, they've lost out on paychecks and income and that kinds of stuff. So lots of different ways that we deal with scarcity. We have to make trade-offs. Let's see, opportunity cost, that's what you give up, basically. There's 3 people right now who are in this room right now, and cheers to those 3 people, even 2 thumbs up. Love you guys. Thank you so much. 3 people in this room. What would you guys rather be doing right now? That's your opportunity cost. You guys decided, the 3 of you are here, and anybody that's watching, not live, but watching later, you're making a decision. You're saying, you know what? Hearing Miss Foster talk about economics might help me on the economics exam. So you're going, I'm willing to give up my video games or doing chores or that kinds of stuff so that I can practice for this macro exam. And it's an investment that is well worth it. Oh, did you see my Clifford shirt? Did I show that to you guys? Yay! I bought that from Mr. Clifford's website last year, and I made it my macro shirt that I wear on test day. So I'll wear it next week too, but I was like, hey, I should pull it out for the live stream, even though I probably can't see it too well in here. It's kind of like that Obama thing, and it just says Clifford at the bottom. Yay! So go to his website. He's got stickers and shirts and all that kinds of stuff. Also, it's not too late. If you want to buy his ultimate review packet, I highly recommend it. He's got like secret videos in there and all kinds of stuff. I did it like 3 years ago just because I was interested to see what it looks like. So check it out. It's pretty cool. And this thing is very similar in that I built this to kind of give you guys a practice. This is my filled out one, but there's an empty one. You guys, if I were you this weekend, go through this empty one. Even if you want to do it on a separate sheet of paper, if you don't have a printer, that kinds of stuff. This is on my website, so check it out. If you can't access it or anything like that, send me an email. I will get you a copy of that right away. I'll be checking email all weekend. I don't really have anything going on. I want to apologize. If you notice my lips, they might look a little like red or swollen, that kind of stuff. I've been dealing with a really bad allergy lately. I don't know what's going on. I did deal with this like 2 or 3 months ago where my lips just got really swollen and inflamed and the skin around my lips just got really dry and stuff. I don't know what's happening. And I did do a teledoc where you can do a doctor's appointment on the computer. And the doctor was basically like, yeah, I don't know. So it was not helpful, but she was very nice. Okay, anyways, so I'm going through here. I would just say go through this, practice graphing all these out. And then the cool thing is you have my answer key too. It has some cool practice problems in there that you can do. And then, like I said, I did the answer key. So just going through this right now. Anything that I'm missing? Multipliers. I didn't talk about multipliers. They'll probably come up. Multipliers. When are we going to use the multipliers? We could see it with the money multiplier. We could also see it with the spending multiplier, or we could also see it with the tax multiplier. Mr. Clifford made an excellent video on multipliers, and I highly recommend it. I showed it to you guys, but I would rewatch it. It's really, really good. Remember that multipliers are basically that one small thing, one small change is going to have a magnified effect throughout the economy. So if I go outside today and I spend $1 at a store, that dollar is going to go to some store owner who's then going to have more income to spend on something else, and so on and so on and so on and all that kinds of stuff. That's why the government did that stimulus package, to spend that money, because they knew this money is going to trickle through the economy and multiply, basically. So what do you need to know about the multiplier effect? Basically, that one small change in spending or taxes or money can cause a greater magnified effect, basically. So what do we need to know about the multiplier? First, we should know that MPS, which is the marginal propensity to save, plus MPC is always going to equal 1. So that's the first thing that we need to know. MPS, how much I save versus how much I spend, is always going to equal up to 1. Basically, because according to, economists feel like basically you can either spend or save your money. That's the two things you can do with it, basically. So knowing that, what do those jerks like to do? And by those jerks, I mean the people at College Board. And this is totally public, so they can hear this too. But they are jerks. I've told you that many times. What do those jerks do? Basically, the formula for finding the spending multiplier is actually 1 divided by MPS. So that's spending multiplier formula. And I think they'll probably have you ask this. I think they'll probably be like, hey, this is the MPC. And then what's the spending multiplier? And so remember what they do, spending mult. Okay. So what they do is those jerks give us MPS. No, they give us MPC. That's what they do. They give us MPC because they're like, haha, you don't, you need to do an extra step, which is not a difficult step, but you'd be surprised how many students don't do that or just confuse the two and that kinds of stuff. So basically, let's say MPC is 0.8. What does MPS have to be? Well, I know it has to be 0.2 because together they have to add up to 1. So what do those jerks do? They're basically like, MPC is this. what's the spending multiplier? And then you can't do 1 divided by MPC. That's not the formula. You have to do 1 divided by MPS. So if they say MPC is 0.8, I have to figure out, and it's not difficult, I just do 1 minus this number to figure out that I have to do 1 divided by 0.2, right? That's my spending multiplier. 0.2 goes, remember my trick? Sorry, the trick. For this one, you'll get a calculator. So forget it, forget the trick. You can just do 1 divided by 0.2. Put it into your iPhone. That's totally fine. But I did teach you guys a trick that if you multiply both sides by 10, it's basically then 10. It's basically then 10 divided by 2. Everyone can do that one, I hope. And that's 5. So that would be our spending multiplier. What does that mean? The last thing that like a lot of students get to hear, and then they're like, I'm done. I figured out that it's 5. And then they write down 5, and then they move on, and then they forget that I asked them another part of the question, which was, if there's an increase of spending in this, how much will it increase? So let's say government increased spending by $100 billion, and the MPC is 0.8. What would then be the multiplier effect? What would be the maximum change? I would do 5 times 100 billion. I would get 500 billion. Sometimes they give you the maximum, and then they ask you for the either multiplier, or they'll ask you for like what amount should they spend by. You know, it's just different. If they say the minimum, that might be then they're asking you for what you need. So basically, just know that initial change times multiplier equals total change. That's what you need to know. So here's what they're going to do. They're going to give you 2 of these and then be like, what's the third? So know this formula and know that they might give you the total thing. They might be like, what if we want to increase the economy by 500 billion? Then you need to know, well, if the multiplier is 5, then I do 500 billion divided by 5 and I get 100 billion basically. Or they'd be like, what if they spend this much and the multiplier is this? What's the total change or maximum change? Then you're going to do that. So just do some practice with that. I've got some on there as well. Let me think. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I've gotten no single comments. Oh, but all 3 thumbs up. Cheers to that. Anybody want to comment a question, a topic you want me to go over? Like I said, I'm going to try to create videos to match with all this stuff. I just wanted to do a live session for you guys. I got another person in the room. Who's here? Comment below. Tell me who's here. I was going to do this for another few minutes and answer any questions. I'm trying to see if I missed anything else. Ooh, this is an important one. The long run self-adjustment. I mean, why do I keep showing this up? I'm so silly. Okay. The long run self-adjustment. Remember, we have to know what fiscal policy we should do, what monetary policy. Oh, I didn't go over the tools of monetary policy. I should have. Tools of monetary policy are reserve requirement, changing that, changing the discount rate, and then the open market operations, that's the buying and selling of bonds. Most of the times they're like, what open market operation should they do? Okay. I want you guys to graph out for me an inflationary gap. Okay. Graph out an inflationary gap and then show me the effect if no fiscal policy action is taken. So let's say the government is just sitting on their hands. They're not doing anything. Maybe they don't recognize a problem. Maybe they don't care that there's a problem. Who knows? Regardless, they're going to ask you, they're not, I'm not totally sure, but they could ask you, what happens if there's no policy action? Okay. Well, if we're in an inflationary gap and there's no policy action, bummer. Because like what policy action could they take? Likely they could probably just raise taxes. They could also just decrease their spending. Those are options there. So basically, what if no policy action is taken? Remember that if no policy action is taken, we will always go back to equilibrium. But we got to know why. We really have to be able to explain this. And this is definitely a gap of understanding that a lot of my students have. They're like, I know we go back to equilibrium, but why? And that what we have to know is that remember that in the short run, prices or wages might be fixed. Like I might be under a contract, that kinds of stuff, and my prices or wages are fixed. But in the long run, they're all flexible. Like right now, even the governor has said like he wants to do a 10% pay cut across the board, like across the state, and that kinds of stuff, because we're dealing with budget issues and all that kinds of stuff. And so, but some labor unions are under contract and that kind of stuff. So it's not easy. You can't just say, okay, 10% cut. There's, you know, some of those things are fixed that maybe when they become flexible again, you could adjust for those. But regardless, so if we do nothing at all, eventually the price level is going to rise. And eventually once those fixed costs like wage contracts and that kind of stuff expire, we're going to see workers demanding higher wages. You're also going to see resource costs go up. So if we do nothing, eventually we're going to go back to equilibrium. And it's the SRAS, remember, that brings us back there. The short run aggregate supply. So remember, if we do nothing at all, if no fiscal policy action is taken, we will go back to equilibrium. SRAS will decrease because flexible wages and resource prices will rise in this case? Or what if we were in, change the LRAS. What if we were in a recessionary gap? Like right now. Now, remember the guy Keynes, which you don't need to know his name, so I shouldn't say that, but Keynes is basically an economist who was like, yeah, eventually, we'll go back to equilibrium, but this sucks right here. This unemployment, people are suffering and all that kind of stuff. So we should take policy action. Keynes is like, hey, move aggregate demand. In fact, I did a rap on that, Keynes' plan, move aggregate demand, basically. She said, do you love a D? I tell her, only Polly, I only love that C and that IG, I'm sorry. Okay, anyways. So what happens if we do nothing at all? Because like Keynes would be like, hey, shift aggregate demand. Hey, just change this. You can control this. But if we do nothing at all, basically, we're going to see, again, flexible wages and resource prices are always going to be the reason that brings us back to equilibrium. And the SRS is going to help achieve that. But basically, in this recession, eventually workers might accept wage cuts. You're also going to see resource costs goes down because there's less of a demand for them. And that's basically, this looks weird because it just, yeah. But basically, you're going to see SRAS increase because flexible wages and resource prices. So please remember that. That's such a complicated concept for students. And to me, I understand why, because the graph is just complicated and there's so many shifts and changes and stuff. But really all you need to know is that if we're in a recessionary gap or an inflationary gap and we do nothing at all, we're always going to go back to equilibrium because of flexible wages and resource prices. That's basically the key core idea of the concept. If you just write that down, even if you don't fully understand it, it's okay. Just write that down. If you say because flexible wages and resource prices and say which direction they're going in, I think you're solid on that question basically. But that's 3.7. That's that long run self-adjustment. Fiscal policy, taxes and government spending. You should know contractionary and expansionary. Expansionary is when we're trying to expand. So we want to increase spending and decrease taxes. Contractionary, we're doing the opposite. Automatic stabilizers. It's kind of a tiny concept, but it could come up. Basically, automatic stabilizers are those things that are automatically built in that help us and help our economy during bad times. For example, we're seeing a lot of automatic stabilizers kicking in, basically. We're seeing people paying less taxes because they're earning less income. We're also seeing that people are demanding and qualifying more for unemployment benefits and other types of government transfers and that kinds of stuff, basically. So, for example, the CARES Act, which was the fiscal policy they did, that was not an automatic stabilizer. That was a specific new law that Congress passed that Trump signed that basically said, people had economic payments and they gave money to states and other stuff like that, basically. A lot of the stuff that's happening, though, is not happening because of new action, stuff that's already built in, which is good that we have those automatic stabilizers. That's one of the things that, I'm obviously worried about what's going on right now, but I'm glad there's things in the system that are there to kind of help self-correct. But unfortunately, they said that a lot of states' unemployment systems are broken down. They use technology from before I was born, which is awesome. But maybe we then need to look at that and look at revamping those and updating those and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully some good will come out of this that will fix some of our systems and make them better working for people. But right now it does suck that a lot of people are suffering because they can't access these benefits or they're not getting what they were promised or that kind of stuff. So anyways, okay, 3 functions of money. Basically, the medium exchange, the unit of account, the store of value. You need to be able to exchange your money for goods and services. You need to be able to count your money and then also store it for later use. There's M1 and M2. M1 is basically the cash and demand deposits and also traveler checks. M2 includes all of M1, but it also includes what we call near monies, which are like savings accounts, time deposits, other stuff like that. Let's see. Oh, okay. So knowing how banks create money, the expansion of the money supply, remember that's through the fractional reserve system. The money multiplier, which I didn't talk about. Oh, when we talked about multipliers, I forgot. Tax multiplier is always 1 less. So remember that. And then the money multiplier is 1 divided by the reserve requirement ratio. Can you see that? Is that good? 1 divided by the reserve requirement ratio. That is the formula for the money multiplier. And then we just use that basically if, maybe someone deposits new money into the bank. We know that the bank doesn't have to hold on to all of it. So that's how money gets multiplied. That's how they essentially create new money. Okay. So I kind of think that's it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Loanable funds. We should just know the combining monetary policy. That is just basically knowing, what's happening if we combine them. So Phillips curve, money growth and inflation, government deficits and debt, crowding out, economic growth. Economic growth, there's ways that we can show it. Can you see this? Yes, cool. that's how I can show it. I can show it by an increase in the PPC. I could also show it by an increase in AD and SRAS, which will in the long run increase the LRAS. So that's how we could show economic growth. They won't have you doing that though, but maybe they won't want you to explain economic growth, and it's just an increase in real GDP per capita over time. And remember, what's per capita? Per capita is just per head. That's important, especially because we have countries of different sizes. Like our president right now, he's like, we lead the world in testing, which maybe we lead the world as far as overall tests, but on a per capita basis, because we're such a large country, we're really not. We're really behind other countries like Germany and South Korea and that kind of stuff. And that's why per capita is really good, because we have different sizes of our countries. So can we compare ourselves to Mexico? Well, not directly, but if we do it on a per capita basis, it just gives us a better idea on a per person level of all the people that could possibly maybe produce in your economy. Okay, public policies and economic growth. Just know that, basically, if government wants to encourage economic growth, they can build more infrastructure, build more roads and bridges and schools and those kinds of things. They can also, tax cuts like supply side policies to try to just increase the money that you give to businesses or the less money that they have to spend. And hopefully, the idea behind that is hopefully they'll use those to then invest and they'll buy. Remember, investment is buying capital, tools, and machinery. But that doesn't always happen. So I think personally a better economic policy is tax incentives. I think instead of just giving money back to businesses, I think the better solution would be like, hey, if you buy a tractor, we'll give you a tax break on that. Hey, if you do this, we're going to give you a tax break on that, basically. Buy the piece of equipment, buy the investment, and then we'll give you the tax break, basically. And we just kind of basically just did an overall cut. And so we saw that only about 20% of the Trump tax cuts actually went to investment, which is unfortunate because Trump's like, we're going to have all this economic growth and we're cutting taxes and deregulation and that kinds of stuff. But the problem with that is that if businesses aren't spending the money wisely, or if they're just spending it on themselves and giving their CEOs and boards higher wages and salaries, that doesn't really help with economic growth. That just makes them richer, helps with their bank account growth, but not with the overall growth as an economy. Okay, guys, I've been doing this almost for an hour, and I feel like the time has flown by, but I'm sure most of you guys are terribly bored. I haven't got one comment yet, even just a hi, something before I leave. If you have any questions, guys, feel free to email me, ask me any questions through Remind. I am available and I am around. I tried to avoid my communication over the last few days simply because I know you guys have other AP tests and I did not want to overwhelm you, but you've got the weekend, so keep studying, keep grinding it out. Now, if any of you are still here to the end, cheers to that. But if you guys for some reason did not take the government exam, you can still take the June exam. Okay. So like I had a student email me and said, I just forgot. I'm really sorry, but I forgot. And it happens. I get it. We're not in the school environment. This is not unique and all this kinds of stuff. You do have a chance. There is a makeup on June 1st. Okay. For Gov, there's a makeup on June 1st that if you didn't log in, your login, your e-ticket will still be valid and they're going to do an automatic enroll on that. So let's say you forgot, but you still want to take Gov, you still can, but you're going to have to wait until June 1st, basically. So if you have any questions for me on that, I can definitely help you with that. I love you all. I miss you all terribly. This still sucks. And I was so excited to see a few of you guys last week. I was there on Thursday and Friday. It was really weird to be at school, actually. Really felt weird to just be there. And but it was really awesome to see you guys. I actually had only intended to, I think someone wants to say hi. You want to say hi?
Hi, everybody.
Will you wish them luck on their exams?
I think you guys are all going to do awesome. Believe in yourselves. You will do a good job. Just have faith. I was an AP student too, and I got a lot of college credit going in. So it's totally worth it. Just make the investment. You've got time. It's not too late. Yes.
Thank you. Cheers to that. Appreciate you. Hey, let's hang out tonight. Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Okay. And every night for that matter. All right, guys. So how could I leave it with anything better than that? Awesome message from my wife. I just saw her across and I was like, you can come over here. Come say hi. So I love you all. You are all beautiful people. Keep doing beautiful things. If you're watching this live, cheers to you. You are the true heroes. So cheers for hanging out with me for a full hour. I'm going to record some more videos today. And if you have any recommendations on anything you'd like to see or anything like that, I will put those up on YouTube. I'm already up to 48 subscribers, so cheers to that. If you haven't subscribed, come on, hit that subscribe button. Looks like everybody's hit that like button on that, so I appreciate that. So guys, I'm just going to say that I love you all. and just keep working hard. You got this. We got the macro test that is Thursday. I'll probably try to figure out another time that I can go live, even if you have suggestions. Like, I would love it if you can do it between this time and this time. It has to be between 8 and 3, though. That is the requirement. It has to be between school hours, Monday through Friday, and we do have to follow by that. So I can record videos anytime I want, but as far as live sessions, I signed an agreement that said I would only do it during the school hours. So love you all. Keep studying, keep working hard, and as Mr. Clifford would say, till next time.